morning, friends. Welcome back to Ruddle Me This. I am your host, as always, the Prince of Dorkness, Taylor Ruddle. I hope you had a fantastic weekend, and I hope you've got a really exciting week to come. I've got a great interview for you this session. Today, I am going to be joined by Renee Church, who is a Auckland-based comedian and a pretty good friend of mine. Little introduction for Renee. Described as clever, relatable, and wise beyond her years, Renee Church is making her mark on the Auckland comedy scene. Quick on her feet and coming in at a massive 5 foot tall, Renee's comedy takes a cynical yet uplifting view on being a young woman in the modern age. Renee is a very funny stand-up comedian. She's an excellent writer, and she has been doing quite a bit of writing for television in New Zealand. I don't know how much I'm allowed to say because it's I don't really exist in that world. But if you've watched a lot of the comedy kind of TV shows in New Zealand, you've probably seen some of Renee's work. I've known Renee for a few years now, and one thing that sticks out to me is Renee has always been very kind to me, which she didn't really have any reason to be, which I think speaks to the quality of her character. Today we are going to be discussing the band The Beatles, which is, I think it was Renee's favourite band. She grew up listening to it and all that kind of thing. So I thought I'd bring her on the podcast to talk about it, as I, to be honest, am not really that familiar with The Beatles. My parents were more like country music people growing up, so I was never really exposed to it as a kid, and therefore my knowledge is pretty lacking. I have, however, done a lot of research on their kind of rise, or where they started out, and the stuff that fascinated me the most was their trip to Hamburg. Many years ago, a comedian called James Fitz, he was he wasn't from Christchurch, but he was in the Christchurch scene for a little bit. He was telling me about this idea he had to do some street performance for stand-up. He was thinking about the idea of just pitching up on a street corner and doing stand-up shows for 8 hours or something. And this idea always kind of stuck with me because the way he pitched it to me was he told me about the Beatles and that they were playing these 8-hour-long shows in Hamburg at the club that they were working at. And with stand-up comedy, if you're an open mic level comedian, you're getting 10 minutes of stage time throughout the week, if you're lucky. Whereas he said if you were doing a street show, that's 8 hours worth of your stage time, sorry. And he kind of tied that back into the whole idea of the 10,000 hours model, and that was kind of what he said is that's where the Beatles got their 10,000 hours from. So even though I haven't really known a lot about the Beatles, I've always been kind of fascinated by them, and this was a great opportunity to talk about that. Before we get into the interview, I'd like to start a new trend on this podcast of playing something funny or doing some jokes, something like that. Give you a little bit of entertainment before the interview starts. Not that the interviews are not going to be entertaining. I've just felt a little bit, not in a rut as such, but I just felt a little bit strange just doing a very quick intro and then get all the plugs in after the interview and then kind of signing off. I want to give you a little more value for your the time you spend listening to the podcast. So what I'm about to play for you is an idea that I had and tried to make it work as a piece on stage, but it never really quite worked. And maybe you'll be able to see why when you hear it. So I won't give you any kind of context. I'm just going to play it. This is some audio editing I did last week. Hope you enjoy it. Roll the tape, me. Did you know that back in World War II, Winston Churchill actually started his own radio broadcast to the people of Britain in order for him to be able to keep in touch with them throughout the war effort? I think this is a really cool example of a leader adopting a new technology and using it to communicate with the people of his country during a crisis. But it did get me thinking, does that mean that Winston Churchill is kind of the first fat white guy with a podcast? And what would that sound like?
Good day, people of Britain. It's me, your host, Winston Churchill, of the show Chillin' with Churchill. The war effort continues due to the inspiring courage of our boys on the front line, giving Hitler and those maniacs under the Third Reich what for. I'm pleased to report that as of this day, the brave forces of the Allies have finally cracked the supposedly unbreakable Enigma code. That wouldn't have happened if the Jerrys had just used NordVPN now, would it? Well, lucky for you, NordVPN is the sponsor of today's episode. NordVPN keeps your data safe and would never surrender your data to the prying eyes of the Axis. Just use the code "We shall fight them on the beaches" at checkout for 10% off your first order. My cabinet have just informed me that a fleet of German bombers are rapidly advancing on London. Oh dear. But before I tell you which districts need to take shelter, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's episode, Magic Spoon. We're all making sacrifices with rationing, but are you sick of powdered eggs for breakfast? Well, that's where Magic Spoon comes in. It's the breakfast cereal you know and love from before the war, but full of protein and with zero sugar. They don't even mix ashes in to make it go further. Just use the coupon code BATTLEOFBRITAIN15 at checkout to save 15% on your first order. I have just received word that Hitler has taken refuge in an underground bunker to hide out for the rest of the war, the snivelling coward. With our boys right on his doorstep marching on Berlin, this war must be reaching its final days. Adolf's probably looking for something to pass the time down in that bunker, and that's where today's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends, comes into play.
You know what? On second thought, maybe it's better that he wasn't. And we are back. What did you think of that? Did you enjoy that? Did you find that funny? I hope you liked it. I didn't really know where to stick it in the podcast, but I figured, well, Renee's last name is Church. Churchill, seemed as fitting of a place as anywhere else, right? All right, well, now that that's done, let's get on with the interview. Please welcome to the show, Renee Church, everybody. Hello, Renee. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. This quite possibly could be the longest time that we've interacted kind of in person in the whole time we've known each other. So,
to be honest, yeah, probably. Yeah.
Geez, when did we meet? A few years ago. It was at a roast battle, wasn't it?
See, because we did that roast battle, and I'm honest, I can't remember you there. Like, I think I do remember you there, but I'm so sorry because I don't remember. There was a lot going on.
Yeah,
I'm sure you were there, and I believe you.
I was knocked out like immediately, so didn't really make an impression, I guess. But so that would have been
when I was judging.
I think you were judging, yeah. Oh no, actually, you did. You did perform because I remember one of the jokes is you called Chester Low Iron Man, and that stuck with me like this whole time, which is a great joke.
That's right. That was crazy.
Oh, I think we're back.
Crazy. Okay, we're back. Should we start from the beginning?
I think I can get that in the edit, so I'll just edit that chunk out.
Okay, cool.
But then after that roast battle, we collectively defeated Craig at that other roast battle. We were putting our heads together and writing some jokes there.
Absolutely. That was incredible. That was so fun. I did win. I came second in that whole thing.
Nice.
I was so into it though. Like I was just like, I've really missed doing roast battles. So, and I kind of felt bad. I think I wrote Craig a poem afterwards because I was like, I'm sorry. Here are things I like about you.
That's the fine line with roast battles, is you can't be too mean. But yeah, so that's a little bit of our history. So today we're going to be talking about the Beatles. I don't know a ton about the Beatles. I wasn't really raised on their music, but I know a few things about them. So they're from Liverpool.
That's it.
And their band, the venue, that they sort of came up in was the Cavern Club, right?
Yes.
What else do I know about the Beatles? There's four of them: John Lennon, Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, and what's the fourth guy called?
George Harrison.
There was a couple of them, weren't they? One of them died really early, right?
Yes. One of them. Two of them are dead. Two of them are alive.
Yeah,
one of them died early. One of them died. I mean, it was like 20 years ago, but later.
Yeah. Okay, so I know that about them. They kind of split up and all sort of went on to do their own musical things, didn't they?
Yeah, for sure.
Who is there one that was sort of the more, because the one that got shot was John Lennon, wasn't it?
He was shot in 1980. He was 40. So they broke up in 1970. And then they all did their solo thing that 10 years when they're all alive, they're just doing solo. A bit of conflict as well, I think, after
Yeah.
the breakup.
Yeah, I can
But
imagine.
so he was shot in 1980, and then George Harrison died of lung cancer in 2001.
Yeah. Was he sort of the famousest well, that's not a word, the most
The
famous
famousest,
the famousest Beatle. That might be the name of the episode actually, the famousest
the
Beatle.
famousest Beatle.
I like that.
I think he was the most outspoken.
Yeah.
He was kind of like John and Paul were the leaders of the band, really.
Yeah.
I think they had the biggest egos, but
Mm.
John was he was my favorite like when I got into them, and he was definitely the most kind of controversial in the next 10 years of his life. He was the most like outspoken.
He was very outspoken about like animal welfare and stuff, wasn't he?
We are just like peace and love, and like I don't even know. It was a lot of just like activism, a
Yeah,
lot of
that sort
a lot
of
of speaking.
that kind of avant-garde thing because he ended up dating Yoko Ono, right? And she was an
Yeah,
avant-garde
they
artist.
met as well, but they were just like powerhouse.
I think my internet is
Yeah, she's
really
crazy. She's
fucky
great, but
today.
she's crazy.
Can you just say that last line about them being
I think
married?
my internet's fucky.
Oh, could be
So they
it.
were married. They were married, and they had a kid as well.
Yeah,
She's crazy. She's cool, but she's crazy.
yeah. Um, okay, so that's a little bit about the Beatles. I'm doing my best to keep this to a timeline with what I know about them. So
Mm.
they started out in Liverpool, and then I know they went to Germany, and that was kind of when they got good.
Yeah, so they went there. This was before Ringo was in the group. He ended up joining the band in Germany, and he was also from Liverpool. But they had another drummer called Pete Best, um, who is like notorious. He got kicked out so that Ringo could join, and it's kind of the biggest like tragedy of like you just feel so sorry for Pete Best.
Oh
But they
yeah,
went
of
off to
course.
to German to just try it out, try get somewhere, try do the thing. And they would play the cabin club. They'd do like, 10-hour shifts a day, just
Yeah,
playing or a night, like they put in there 1,000 hours, which I think
yeah,
is why
yeah.
they were so good by the time they got famous, is they were just doing it.
Yeah, because I remember hearing I've listened to sporadic interviews about them and stuff, and I remember that yeah, when they went to Germany and then got back, they were just like so much tighter in terms of like I guess timings and stuff like that for their songs and everything. Um the I remember reading somewhere as well, that's where they kind of learned to perform because they were doing like 10-hour shows. They kind of had to
Yeah.
bring the energy up, and it kind of forced them to learn how to be performers.
Yeah, for real. And I think that's so invaluable to have. It was such an insane lifestyle that they lived as young men.
Yeah.
And but yeah, by the time they got there, they were just so experienced and like
Once they
for
got
for many other things in your life, it also pays to just have all of that behind you as well.
yeah, once they got back to the UK, was it a long time before they kind of blew up?
I can't really see these facts I used to know off the top of my head, but I think the early 60s was them in Hamburg, and then 1963 was when their first album came out, and they kind of hit it big.
Oh, okay.
Um, so I don't think it was long after they'd come back, and they sort of probably just met Brian Epstein, their manager, and just kind of hit it. And Brian was really savvy, like he had a real vision, and I think was part of
Yeah.
the reason why he got them
Yeah, of
there.
course.
But
Was
yeah, I
it?
don't think it was long after they came back. They came back and just hit the ground running.
Wow, that's great. Well, the other thing I was gonna say about the Beatles is they like we mentioned the whole Lennon McCarthy thing, those two being the kind of were they the two songwriters in the band?
Yeah, so um there's a lot of like lore about the Beatles in terms of like Paul and John write the music. George was writing a lot, but they weren't really letting him get in with his
Oh,
songwriting. Like it
bummer,
was a real like he was kind of just he was writing these songs, he just couldn't do anything with them.
bummer.
And Ringo and George would have like one or two songs on the album, each album.
Yeah,
And then when they finished up in 1970, George had been working on his own solo album in the years coming up to that. And so he
yeah,
released All Things Must Pass, which is like it's like a 2-disc album full of
Yeah.
songs he just backstocked of ones that
Yeah.
he'd written.
Well, that's industrious of him. Good on him.
Yeah, it's a great album too, but he was just like just absolutely fanging to release this stuff for like
I
years the
I
whole
can
time.
imagine, eh? It was a bit like I was watching. We just did the episode about Kiss. I'm not sure if that's released or not yet with Craig, but we were talking about how the what were they? The Gene and Paul were kind of
Mm.
the Lennon McCartney of the Kiss. And I remember seeing a
Hmm.
concert where they let Ace Frehley sing for something, and it just seemed like, whoa, like they're letting him do that. Like, um,
Yeah,
so I imagine,
totally. It was, I think, a lot like that for George and Ringo.
yeah.
Um, for sure. Just letting them have a song.
I always loved how on The Simpsons, Marge's favorite Beatle was Ringo, and it was
I
quite
know.
wholesome the way she'd like write letters to him and stuff. Have you
He's so
seen
wholesome though.
have,
He's so wholesome.
have you seen that video of him? He's I forget what he's telling. I think he's telling people to stop sending him fan mail or stop sending him stuff in the mail or something.
Yeah.
And he opens, he's like,
No more
"Hey,"
autographs.
he's like, "Hey, peace and love, everyone, peace and love. Please stop sending me whatever." He didn't want to sign autographs. Was that what he was saying?
Yeah, well, so the whole thing with John Lennon being shot is that and if there are any Beatle fans out there, I recommend watching this biopic. It's called The Killing of John Lennon. And I watched it when I was 15, so I actually can't confirm whether it's still good. But when I was 15, I watched it and I was like, this is amazing.
It slapped at 15.
But it's yeah, I thought it was great then. But it was a biopic just about Mark Chapman, who was John Lennon's killer, who
Yeah.
just the lead up of why he did it, and he
Yeah.
like was kind of obsessed with John Lennon, and he was obsessed with he read The Catcher in the Rye, and he was obsessed with people who were phony and how they should be brought justice, and then he saw
Right.
John Lennon being a phony because he
Oh,
would,
okay.
the lyric in Imagine where it's like, imagine no possession, but he's like, you have yachts and like estates and
Yeah.
stuff, you're a phony. So
Yeah.
he kind of got obsessed. He was obviously really mentally disturbed. He got really obsessed with John Lennon,
Yeah.
and he'd wait outside his hotel. And then the night before he killed him, he like, there's a picture of John signing an autograph for him. There's like a picture of it, and then the next day he like shoots him. And so I think after
Oh.
that, Ringo was like, I don't want to sign autographs for people anymore, which is fair.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. It's an occupational hazard. But yeah, the thing that was so funny to me about the video is the way he's like, he uses peace and love like about 8 times in the video, and it sounds almost threatening the way he says it, like, peace and love, everyone, peace and love, no autographs, thank you, peace and love. And you're just like, okay, Ringo, like, settle down.
It's so good, eh? It's so good.
Presumably the last two Beatles, are they still they're still performing?
Yeah, for sure. I've seen both of them. So I saw Ringo in 2012,
Uh
2013, 2013, which was really good. And
Yeah.
he's a funny one. He does makes his little songs and goes out there, and God bless him, we love
Yeah.
it. And I saw Paul McCartney in 2017, which is incredible. He's just a
Yeah.
powerhouse to this day. He's such talent, such a good songwriter.
Wow.
They're still very much touring, still very much releasing music and stuff.
How old would those two guys be now?
Ringo's the same age as John, so he would be 83.
Wow.
This
That's
I
great.
think Ringo just had his birthday yesterday, so he'd be 83.
Oh, happy
And
birthday,
then
Ringo.
he always does a thing where he gets everyone to wish, say peace and love at midday on his birthday. And I'm like, Ringo, there's time zones. Like you can't.
I love
He's
it.
so good.
That's
And
brilliant.
Paul will be maybe 80, I think, at this stage.
Yeah. So then when they were first coming up, they would have been very early 20s, presumably.
Yeah. Well, I think
Wow.
they got together as a band when they were like 15, 16, they were together for
Wow.
ages.
Doesn't that just make you furious as a performer that people like
Oh,
figured it out so early and like had
I'm pretty
success?
sure I'm the age that George was when he left the Beatles, when the Beatles ended.
Oh man.
Like, it's terrible.
I don't want
Like,
to hear that.
it's terrible. I hate it.
I was gonna say as well, what do you remember your first memory of the Beatles?
I think so. My dad really loves them.
Yeah.
And we grew up just driving. Like I remember driving to Taupo, which is obviously a city in New Zealand, like
And
on
you
school holidays
pronounced
or
it
whatever,
correctly
and he'd be
too.
playing Taupo.
Very well.
We
Nice
love
work.
correct pronunciation.
Yeah.
I remember him playing it a lot. Just my dad plays music. Or he has music playing every second of the day, all the time. He
Yeah.
can't function without it. So
Yeah.
a lot of the Beatles were playing. But I got into them because I was watching. Have you seen Michael Jackson's Moonwalker movie?
Yeah, I think so.
It's a fever dream. This unrelated to the Beatles, but recommend if you can watch Moonwalker. It's crazy.
Okay.
But Sean Lennon, who is John and Yoko's son, he's in that, and he's like 13 years old.
Wow.
And I watched the movie with my brother, and he was like, "Oh, Sean Lennon's in this." I'm like, "Who's Sean Lennon?" And he's
Yeah.
like, "John Lennon's son." I'm like, "Who's John Lennon?" And he's like, "He's from the Beatles." And so I got really into Sean Lennon because he's a musician.
Oh, cool.
And then we went to the Beatles. That was sort of how it went.
Right. That's quite an interesting path to get into them, but very cool. And do you have a favorite album or kind of era of the band?
It's so hard to say, but I think if I had to say era, it would be mid 60s. That would be because I have quite a few like I love Rubber Soul and I love Revolver and I love the first half of Yellow Submarine is an album and the second half is orchestral. So people don't really
Yeah.
count it, but I
Yeah,
really
yeah.
loved that first half of that album.
Yeah.
And Help is maybe my favorite. And that's mid 60s as well.
Yeah. They actually had a lot more. I don't know why, but before we did this interview, I was just reading a tiny bit on them. I had this weird idea in my head that the Beatles were only together for like 2 years, but it was actually more like sort of 10 or 20, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was they released albums from 63 to 70.
Okay.
So it was like 7 years and they did 2 albums a year, which is crazy.
That's a lot of albums, but that's not a long time, is it?
Nah, and the albums are still they're great. All of them are great. But yeah, they would do. I think they were like on contract or something to be doing 2 albums a year.
That I suppose that must come from the fact that they were so used to performing for those long stretches. Like I guess at that point it's just like, well, we've done all this training, so let's like make hay while the sun shines kind of thing, right?
Totally. And I think they were just like the biggest thing in the entire world. They were just like, you need to start. You need to just keep doing this. You need to keep this train going.
I remember I've seen videos of people that you can't even hear them from the screaming from the audience and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, well, it's funny. Me and Craig went to the Auckland Town Hall last week, I think, to see Taylor Tomlinson. She's a really funny comedian. And we were just talking about how the Beatles performed there when they came here. And we were like Googling pictures and looking at the stage and be like, oh, that was where they would have performed. And Craig was saying that they couldn't even do their Christchurch show. They begun their Christchurch show and then they couldn't even finish it because it was just so insane. Like the Christchurch show kind of just barely happened.
That sounds like Christchurch to me.
Isn't that crazy?
They played at
crazos.
They played at the Christchurch Town Hall.
Yes,
wow.
I think. Yeah, they definitely played at Auckland Town Hall, which is where we were. I can't remember. I need to look that up. But they couldn't do. And if you've been to Auckland Town Hall, very niche New Zealand reference, but they have this beautiful organ that it's like 2 stories high that you look at when you're sitting looking at the stage, and then there's like these kind of big steps that go up to the organ behind where the person would stand on the stage, like behind them. But when we looked at these pictures of the Beatles, people were sitting on those seats behind the Beatles on the stage.
Like just audience members.
That's so odd. Yeah, just audience, like girls, like just standing. And it would be so, because you're kind of standing, you're sitting behind them while they're performing. It's so odd.
Yeah. That would have been a great, I wonder how much they had to pay for those tickets, right?
I know. My grand's husband, this is a fun story. He passed away about a year ago. Rest in peace. But he went to the Beatles Wellington show because he was living there. And he said it was so good he went the next night.
Wow. I know people have made that mistake with comedians and gone back the second night and being devastated to learn that it was the same material.
God, that is gushing. Jeez Louise.
That also seems so bizarre to think that you could get a ticket to that they wouldn't be sold out in seconds.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
I'm like, you think about the Eras tour and stuff, you think that stuff's gone when it's in demand,
Yeah, I had this great experience. I was setting up for a show on Thursday last week, and there was a couple. We were about an hour before the show was to start, so there was just the usual people, and there was a couple that were sitting in the little performance area, and they had kind of first date energy, and it took me about 30 minutes to set everything up, and the entire time she was just telling him how hard it was to get Taylor Swift tickets, and to this guy's credit, he managed to seem engaged the whole time, oh yeah, oh really, oh okay, and it's just wow, that's a huge thing, trying to get tickets for.
I wonder if they were first date, because that's That's something I'd do if I was into Taylor Swift. I'd be like, oh, my whole day's been stressful.
Well, maybe that was I didn't catch the very start of the conversation, but yeah, I don't know. It just felt like first date energy to me, but interesting
That's
conversation
so
for the first
funny.
date. Yeah.
So he
Um,
was just kind of not, he was uninterested in her story. He was just like, all right.
I feel like for the first 10 minutes you can kind of be like, wow, that's really difficult, but like he had to keep that energy for the whole rest of the conversation and it just kept going. And I just sort of went, oh geez, like good on this guy. You know, he's I don't know, for all I know, maybe he was enjoying the conversation, but I still remember just sort of looking at the time being like, wow, they're still talking about Taylor Swift.
This is going.
Yeah.
Wow. Gosh.
So there was another delightful tangent on something else, but the Beatles. I was going to say as well. Do you feel like the Beatles have influenced you as a performer in any way?
That's a really interesting question. Well, I don't know. I think the Beatles were definitely, excuse me, the Beatles were definitely very funny.
They
Like they
were,
did
right?
a couple of movies in the 60s, which were real good. They did Hard
Oh,
Day's Night, they did Help, which are my favorite ones.
yeah,
Magical Mystery Tour was a bit kind of trippy, but they were really funny.
yeah,
And I think I really enjoyed their comedy as a young one as well.
yeah,
Um, I don't know. I mean, just speaking before about how they just went hard out in Germany and just did show after show after show.
yeah,
I think that is a really good work ethic for comedy because
yeah,
comedy is all about just doing the thing. It's all about just
yeah,
doing the gig, constantly gigging. There's always another gig. There's
yeah.
always another chance to prove yourself. Like, I think after years of doing comedy, I really believe in that. Just keep at it and do it as much as you can.
Yeah, I would say as well, like just from what little I see of the Auckland scene, it seems like you are definitely like putting in your 10,000 hours. I seem to see your name pop up on the lineups and stuff like that. So they must have definitely left an impression on you in that kind of way.
Yeah, for sure. I just think it's so yeah, I've made it a habit, I think, to do just every gig. It's just my whole life. And I
Mm,
think it was probably theirs as well. They just decided to do that. And it was
yeah.
probably maybe the clubs and the bars were like, you need to fill this 10-hour spot. And it's like, what
Yeah.
do? You want to get to where you want to go. So you put your time in.
I remember reading, I don't remember what the number was, but I remember their pay was not that great for how, if you broke it down to like the amount of hours, they weren't really earning that much. Um,
Like in terms of just the Beatles in general, like when they were famous.
I think even just for any musician working for 10 hours in a nightclub, I think it was sort of like enough to
Mm,
survive. And then I think they had a sort of dormitory that they lived in, but it was just like a cinder block kind of room with some
yeah.
mats on the floor and they were sleeping there. And yeah, that the whole idea of like I was listening to Conor McGregor talking about this as well, the UFC fighter, and he said that someone called him talented, and he was like, "I'm not talented. I'm just obsessed. Anyone can be good at this. You just have to be obsessed, and you have to make it your entire life." Uh,
Totally. I
and
fully agree with that.
yeah, it is an interesting one with we all pick our kind of our art form for lack of a better word or something like that, and it really does have to sort of dominate your life for I don't know 10 years, 20 years until you kind of you're seeing comedians like big into any of the sort of
Mm.
American podcasts, like I don't know, like Tom Segura and his wife's one or that sort of thing.
No, I love podcasts a lot. I don't get to listen to them as much anymore just because I think I work a lot now, but
Yeah,
huge fan of Comedy Bang Bang.
I've not heard
That's
of that one.
one of my first favorite podcasts. So
Who's on
good.
that one?
There's like 800 episodes.
Wow.
Yeah, Comedy Bang Bang. If have you listened to it before?
No, I haven't. Who are the kind of hosts or whatever it is?
It's an easy podcast to get into because they have a lot of guest stars on
Yeah,
it. But it's hosted by Scott Aukerman and he wrote for like what was that show called? I can't even remember. Anyway,
yeah,
this is bad. But he basically just has it's an LA based show and he hosts it and he might have a famous comedian or a comedian who's doing something has got a show coming out and then he'll
yeah.
have an improv comedian come in and be a character and it's like and they just interact with this character
Oh, that's
like the
cool.
characters are insane like they're so ridiculous
Hmm.
like they had this Andy Daly is a comedian who's on it a lot and his character is incredible. My favorite one
Yeah.
is this guy, he's a guy called Hot Dog and he's like this American guy who's obsessed with doo-wop music.
Right.
And he's just like, he wants to get into the band Sha Na Na. Do you know who Sha Na Na is?
I've heard the name, but I couldn't say what they
They're
are.
like they're a band from the 80s who did 50s doo-wop. And they like, and
Oh
he just comes
yeah.
and he's just like, I want to get in Sha Na Na. And they're like, but they've broken up. He's like, no, no, they're gonna let me in. And it's just like, it's so funny. Like it's
Yeah.
hilarious improv. Okay, we're
Um,
good. Yeah, Comedy Bang Bang. Recommend, have a listen.
yeah, definitely. I was gonna say as well, have you ever done any improv or are you pure stand-up?
I'm a pure stand-up, unfortunately. I wish I was cool enough to do improv and confident. What about you? Have you done any of that?
Well, so I have done a little bit of improv, and when I was in Japan, one of our guys, he studied for a little bit. I think he did a few weeks in New York, and he kind of learnt what the basics were. And he was kind of like the teacher that was a couple of lessons ahead of us, so he brought it back and taught us how to do some of the basics. And we did a couple of performances, but I haven't done a heap. But I sort of go, I do enjoy doing it, but I kind of had to pick whether I wanted to focus on stand up. Felt like I couldn't really focus on both at the same time. And I was more into stand up at the time because it felt like you're kind of developing a body of work, I guess. And the thing with improv is because it's a clean slate, each scene, that is appealing in itself because you can just like play and have fun. But at the time, I was just more into the idea of building up a thing rather than etch a sketching it each time you do a scene.
Yeah, for sure. Because Craig says that he's like improv's real fun to do. It's terrible to watch, which I think is kind of funny.
It definitely can be. And one thing that I've noticed from talking to some improv people is that the type of improv that the masses, quote unquote, the masses enjoy watching is not the type of improv that improvisers tend to enjoy doing because it's all games, like whose line is it anyway? And I think that's the paradox is people mainly just want to go and see an improv show and see whose line, but the improvisers want to flesh out their characters and they want to do callbacks and they want to like skip the timeline forward 10 years and see where the characters are and that kind of thing. And I think that's a lot more like intellectually stimulating for the improvisers, but unfortunately people are just like, where's the bit where they have the buzzers and the props, like they want like just fun little short thingies.
Yeah
I forgot why I started asking about improv. I think it was just because I'd seen those shows by Love Lamp up in Auckland, and I know they do like a collab with a comedian or something, right?
I did that for 2021 Love Lamp had a fest show or like a fest stint in comedy festival, and I was a monologuist. I did a monologue which was basically I did just my material, did like a 6-minute spot, and I did that 3 times throughout the hour, and then they'd go do stuff on my material, which was really fun idea. It was easy for me because I could shoot it with my material. But because I asked Amy Bird, who she runs it, I can't remember, but she got me to do it. I think I asked her before. I was like, so there's I do 2 monologues, right? She's like, yeah. I was like, okay, cool. And then we begun the show. Or no, I begun the show. I did the 2 monologues, and then Amy goes, and for her 3rd monologue is welcome back out, Renee. And I was like, what? So I came out and I just read my notes on my phone, and it went down well. People found it was like I wasn't super flustered, but it was funny. I was like, well, I'll just pull something out of my ass.
Yeah.
So I just read notes off my phone, and that was fun.
That does sound
but that was the whole point. Like I was kind of just like, well, think of something on the spot like everyone else is. Like it kind of put me in that zone.
You're in the spirit of it. When in Rome, as they say.
Honestly, though, the one thing I will say about improv, which was so impressive to me, so I turned up there, I don't know, like half an hour before the show started, and they were all, maybe about 8 to 10 of the improv troupe, and they were all doing their improv warm-up, so they're all standing in a circle doing the, like, just really pumping each other up, just getting the blood flowing, just doing the games. And I was like, wow, this is such a nice vibe, because when I turn up to a green room for stand-up, everyone just wants to kill themselves. They're all just like, this shit sucks. I'm gonna like the vibe is so different. It's so different.
Pacing, yeah.
Totally.
Well, that's one thing that bugs me about stand-up is because it's so individualistic. There is no there's very little camaraderie between the comics. And like I think that might just be a consequence of the fact that it's not a team-based thing. Because at the end of the day, if you're a full-time stand-up, it's just you and maybe like an opening act, and then your opening act is only with you until they get big enough to start doing their own shows. So like it's really just you sitting on the top of the mountain. I think there are certain pockets of comedians that like are sort of trying to, I don't know, make us all have each other's back. But yeah, that's something we could definitely learn from improv, is the idea of like, if you look good, I look good. And
For sure. It's a tough thing because it can be really competitive. I think it's nice with Craig and I, since we're together and we both do comedy.
yeah,
We do like cheer each other on
yeah,
when each other gets a win, and it is kind of a team thing, even though it's obviously very individual comedy is. But even things like we'll turn up to a gig and we'll both film each other's set. And
yeah,
it's like nice to have like a little like duo to be able to make those kind of things happen,
that is
rather
useful,
than but it's that works really well between the two of us. That's a blessing.
Yeah, that's great, because then like you're not like trying to steal each other's thunder at all, but there are certain like, one thing people learn is like, the more you get into doing stand-up and probably other art forms, is like there's a lot of admin that you have to do as well that people don't think about. It's just things like emails. Like I spend so much of my time chasing up venues about things, and playing phone tag with them, and then even just filming your own set, organizing it. Like I basically refuse to film other comic sets now, because that just results in me having it sit on my Google Drive for like months, and then the day that I go, all right, they've probably deleted it by now, I get the message, hey, the video's gone. Oh God, leave me alone.
You're like, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's tough, eh? Yeah, it's tough. It's being a comedian, you've really just got to start from the beginning and just really work your way up, build your craft, and just build those stripes. It doesn't make sense, but you know what I mean. It's you've really just got to work at it until you're there.
It, hey? But I think that's really cool that improv and stand-up do cross over, like with that Love Lamp group. I always love their posters as well. So we got a couple minutes left. Anything you want to plug that you got coming up? I honestly have no idea when this is coming out, so I'll deal with a plug of your socials and stuff like that. But yeah, just anything you're looking forward to coming up.
Well, I am looking forward to going to brunch in an hour with Liv McKenzie. That's nothing to do with anything. You guys will miss that. I'll be gigging all around Auckland. If you see an open mic in Auckland, New Zealand, I will most likely be on it.
Yeah.
I'm doing the 6 p.m. show at the Classic on the 20th of July. That's for 7 days, so that will be really exciting. And I'm doing a gig on the 31st, and I can't remember where it is, but it's got Nick Ruddle on it and Brenna Green, who are very, very cool comics.
Oh, I did the poster for that. It's at Vulcan.
Oh, yeah, it's a great poster.
But thank you. I appreciate it. By that time, this episode won't be up by that point, but I guess when people are listening, I hope those gigs went well for you.
Thank you so much. I'll just be doing comedy. I'm sure if you follow my socials, I'll be posting about it.
Yeah, if you see Renee on lineup, treat yourself and go and check it out.
Hell yeah, comedy, we love.
Yeah, I appreciate you joining me. It's been an interesting one with some tech, so hopefully it's not too. I'll cut out all of the weirdness, but I appreciate you joining me, and I hope your brunch goes great.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Love to all. No more autographs.
Peace and love. And welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that interview. I recorded it a long time ago, and if I remember correctly, it was during that week that Auckland and Christchurch, were having really bad torrential rain. So I think our internet connection did drop a few times. I'm just about to go and edit the interview now, so if there was random static noises and other transitions, that would have just been when the connection would have dropped. As I seem to remember, it did happen a couple of times in that interview. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to give you the lowdown on Renee's social media platforms now. Just bear with me a second, as Renee is another comedian with different tags on every single platform. So on Facebook, you can find Renee at Renee Church Comedian. On Instagram, she is Ren_Church. On TikTok, she is Simp Biscuit, like a Limp Biscuit, but with 2 P's. And then on Twitter, she's very, very funny at Twitter. She is LexHoney_. I will chuck all of those links into the show notes, so you can just click on which one you want to follow Renee on, but I highly recommend you do, at least Twitter and Instagram. Very, very funny content being uploaded by Renee. As always, you know I'm on all the social media platforms at Taylor Ruddle Comedy. Follow Can Do Comedy for gig updates. I've had a couple of interesting conversations over the last week that seem to be leading towards some pretty cool events, I guess. They're not exactly stand-up events, but just watch the space, I guess. Follow Can Do Comedy as the announcements will go live there before everything else. As always, Tuesday nights quiz at Bridie's Bar and Bistro. That is hosted permanently now by Chris Wood. He has taken over from Henry Hickman. Henry was away for a few weeks, and Chris filled in. Very, very grateful to Chris for filling in. Chris has agreed to take over as the kind of permanent host of that, and it's been really picking up. I think we've had 5-6 teams in the last couple of weeks, which is really encouraging. So if you're in that area and you want a really kick-ass quiz, definitely get along to that. I think Chris is doing a great job as the host there. Wednesday nights come out to Moi Moi. That is my quiz night. They're all hosted by Can Do Comedy, but I actually host the one on Wednesdays. Same quiz. It'll be a different quiz, but it's all run by G Quiz. Very, very good quiz. More interesting than your sort of typical Believe It or Not, but not quite as off the chain as some quizzes I've seen. Like, it is still a points-based kind of thing. Every Thursday, of course, check out the Laugh Cellar at Austin Club. We have had to, fortunately, unfortunately, it's all relative, we've had to change the price. It is no longer koha. It is $10 entry. So I do apologise if that is going to make it a barrier for you to come out. But unfortunately, we just had to change that up in order to actually kind of ensure the future of that show. So now that it's $10, we're not going to gouge or push it up or anything like that. Literally, if everybody in that room paid $10, we could run that show, forever. If you listen to the show, you know I live very frugally, so that's $10 entry is more than enough for that show to function perfectly as it should. Speaking of the Laugh Cellar, I don't know how much I can say right now, as it's only kind of penciled in, but we might be adding another night of the week under the Laugh Cellar banner. So if you are unable to make it out on Thursdays for whatever reason, just keep an eye on the Can Do Comedy Facebook page, and once we make the announcement in the new year, you'll be able to see kind of what the plan is for that show going forward. But if you've been wanting to make it out but you can't do it on Thursdays, we might have a better alternative for you coming up soon. In terms of a life update for anybody, if you're listening this far, you're interested in hearing life updates. How am I doing? Things are good. My flatmate has been battling some kind of illness for the last week, and I've been desperately trying not to catch it as well. I had a really bad run of hay fever today and I think yesterday, so that set my paranoia into overdrive. But I think I'm good. I've been smashing vitamin C, drinking lots of water. I've actually been, that's what I can tell you about. I've been exercising way more consistently for the past couple of weeks. I finally got I've always, how do I even start this? I'd always had this thing in my head that nighttime was the best time to train, and because the gym would be quieter. I tend to like peace and quiet. But since I've been doing this kind of thing full time, it's freed up my days, and I've always been meaning to kind of get into the routine of going and training in the mornings. But I think much like when the pandemic happened and we all realized that it's not free time that's holding me back from achieving my dreams, it's actually motivation. I finally got myself kind of into the mindset of get in there and train at sort of between 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock, get in some good cardio, do a bit of stretching, and then get home with, feeling proud of myself that I've done a little bit of self-care, and the day's not even finished yet. And I've even started to notice that on the days that I don't train, I feel like I kind of want to. So that's good. I think that's kind of when you've made a new habit or something like that, right? I don't know, but it's very promising. I seem to have, it's like with Alcoholics Anonymous. people are only ready to join Alcoholics Anonymous when they're ready to, and you can't force it. And it seems like I am ready to become a daytime gym person. So that's good. Love that for me. Just done a big tidy up in the house, reorganized my kind of working space. It was, I had to kind of do a bit of a separation, and then I now have 2 desks. I have a computer desk, and then I have a sort of temporary desk where my printer and laptop go. Because previously, and actually as I'm recording this right now, I'm sitting on I'm sitting on my sofa holding the microphone talking to myself. And that system had been working out pretty well. That was where I tended to reply to emails, and I would do printing or posting graphics, whatever I needed to do. I would kind of do it from this sofa right here. But I started to realize that I was confusing myself, and that the sofa became this kind of hybrid work and chill out space. But then what happened is when I would try to chill out, I think my brain was still wanting to go in work mode, and then vice versa. When I was in work mode, I kind of just wanted to chill out. So it wasn't working very well. I think this happened to a lot of people during the pandemic. They had to very clearly define workspace, sleeping space, chill out space, etc. So the other day I did a bit of a shuffle around, and now I've got like a quote-unquote office space, and I've got a place to sit and watch Sons of Anarchy for the 5th time on my laptop. So that's all going good. I think I did have a few nights this week where I was being kept up a little bit by that fear of like, oh God, do I have to start looking for a job in the new year? But based on a few conversations that I've had this week and just in general how things are going, it looks like I'm going to be pretty stable cash flow wise going into 2024, assuming the couple of things that I have in mind pan out, which I'm kind of hoping they will. I'm thinking I'll probably do a year in review. I think it was like March. I can't actually remember when I first quit my day job. Whenever that was, I'm going to find out what the year anniversary of that was, and I'll do a podcast that is my kind of reflection on the year being a self-employed variety entertainer, as my tax status calls me. Because while it has been awesome, there are a lot of things that are really frustrating about it. So it would be good to show the balance of, it's great to be your own boss, but be aware that this is going to happen and this is going to happen, and you're going to have to think about this and blah, 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 blah. A very good friend of mine has actually just gone back from being self-employed to working for, quote-unquote, the man again. And I think it's kind of a grass is always greener situation. I think I tend to do one for a few years and then start to think that the other one might be a better situation for me. So I'm almost a year into being self-employed. I guess I have to check in another 2 or 3 years and just see if I'm still feeling stoked to be self-employed. That could be an interesting podcast too. Okay, I think I'm just going on a bit now. It's been so long since I've actually recorded one of the intros to these and have it release a few days after. I'm recording this on Thursday, the 7th of December. I'm about to finish recording this, probably edit the episode, get it all uploaded, and then I'm going to go to the Laugh Cellar, and I think I'm hosting the show tonight, so that should be fun. Got a couple of new jokes to try out, and hopefully I don't bomb. Well, I think I'll wrap it up there. Appreciate you listening. As always, the podcast has been growing, as I've already said many times in the last few. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify if you'd like to help me reach more people. Tell a friend about the podcast if you think they would enjoy it, and just keep listening. I appreciate every single listener out there. Hopefully we can really push this thing in 2024 and see if we can get it to the stage where it is kind of generating a little bit of income for me, or at least paying for itself, because that would be delightful. So thanks so much for listening. I'll catch up with you next Monday. Hope you have a lovely rest of the week, and I look forward to talking to you next Monday. Ruddler out.